Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Concordia University's Force Space. Thanks for joining us for today's event. This is the Leeds Mini-Symposium for 2025. I think we've been hosting a version of this symposium since maybe 2022. And if you don't know, Leadership in Environmental and Digital Innovation for Sustainability is Leeds. That's a program at the Graduate Training Initiative that's focused on developing the next generation of sustainability leaders. And we would like to begin by acknowledging that Concordia University is located on unceded Indigenous lands here in Tiohtià:ke, Montreal. And we respect the continued connections with the past, the present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Here at Force Space, we work with our university community to help mobilize knowledge. We co-create daily activities that examine research questions and projects, things happening all across the university. We're running today's event as a live stream to both Zoom and YouTube. So those of you joining us there, your comments and questions are very much appreciated. Just pop those into the chat. We can read those out a little bit later on. Those of you here in the space, sort of the same. If you have any comments, questions, raise your hand. We'll run a microphone around over to you so everyone can hear. Okay, with that, it's very much my pleasure to hand the microphone over to the program director of Leeds and also professor in Department of Geography, Planning, and Environment here at Concordia, Damon Matthews. Damon, great to have you back.
Thank you, Doug. Bonjour tout le monde. Merci d'être venu. Bienvenue à Concordia et à l'Espace 4. Je suis Damon Matthews, directeur du programme LIND, the Leeds Programme. Nous sommes techniquement un programme bilingue, mais je vais switcher à l'anglais maintenant pour que je peux parler un peu plus fluidement. So yes, welcome everybody. Thank you, Doug, for the introduction. I think it's maybe been since 2020 that we've held this event in Fourth Space. The first year was all on Zoom. I believe the second year in 2021, we did one of our first fully hybrid events. And since then have been able to obviously have more in-person participation, but Fourth Space has been instrumental to these events working fluidly and very well. So thank you, Doug, and all the Fourth Space team for that. So we are in the 6th year of the Leeds program, the 6th year of a 6-year grant. So this is the last year of the Leeds program, which is sad to say, but it's been a really good and positive experience. Leeds began as a partnership with Future Earth, the first the executive director of Future Earth at the time, Amy Lewis, conceived of the idea of the Leeds program. And via Future Earth and the spin-off initiative called Sustainability in the Digital Age, we proposed and built this program to look at how digitalization and environmental change were shaping the world and how they could be understood together and leveraged towards more positive outcomes. The Leeds program has involved 4 universities. It's based mostly at Concordia by virtue of me and several other collaborators being here, but has involved researchers and students from McGill, Université de Montréal, and UQAM. And so it has been a strong coalition. We've had, I think, more than 80 graduate student postdoctoral trainees who have been funded by the program over the years. At least 20, maybe 30 or more faculty collaborators who have supervised those students and participated in the program in various ways. The premise of the program when it started was built around the idea that AI and the digital revolution combined with climate and environmental change were 2 of the main forces shaping the world and the trajectory of the future. And the goal was to explore the interface of those 2 forces, both to understand the digital world and what it could be used for, but also to understand how the digital world could be used to more positively shape the outcome of climate and other environmental changes. A lot has happened in the last 6 years. The digital revolution has, if anything, accelerated. The world has changed in lots of ways, not necessarily for the better. AI on one hand has enabled remarkable new analytical capacity, and this is one thing that we have tried to incorporate into the program over the years is how we might use digital tools to as a research tool, but also to amplify the reach and the impact of the research that we're doing in sustainability sciences. But AI itself has transformed yet again. When we started the program, predictive AI tools were the norm, so models that could simulate data and make predictions. Of course, 2 years ago, generative AI exploded onto the scene and has become a transformative thing in the world, but also a very powerful research tool. And so we have also tried to think about how generative AI can be used for research and for amplifying the impact of research. AI also has a dark side, which has become more and more apparent over the last 5 years. AI is a powerful tool and gets used for many, many different things. Many of those things are the very forces that are accelerating environmental change in the world. It's very well publicized and known applications of AI in oil and gas extraction, to promote online consumerism, to spread misinformation, to generate wealth and ultimately further inequality in the world. And so, this is another theme that has become more and more important over the course of the 5 years of the LEADS program. And of course, the direct environmental impact of AI itself on greenhouse gas emissions, energy use, water consumption through the propagation of data centers is probably one of the most, if not the biggest, one of the fastest increasing environmental impacts of economic activity in the world right now. So these are the kind of issues that we've grappled with over the course of the LEADS program, and that will really shape, I think, the future of what sustainability in the digital age means going forward. So we're entering the last year of the program. Odile is going to speak about some of the events we have planned over the next year or so. I do want to thank many people for their involvement in the program over the last 6 years. Of course, Amy Lures, who really conceived of this program in the beginning. Eliane Ubalijoro and Micheline Ayoub, who were the subsequent leaders of the Future Earth team here in Montreal. Also, Jennifer Gerard and Nulishi Kamura Singh, who have left Future Earth but have made contributions to the LEADS program quite a bit over the years. And then the current Future Earth team, who continues to be an active partner in this program and supporting the program in many, many ways. Nilufar Sabet Kassouf, Andrea Ventimiglia, who is here today, Camilo Elio Monroy, also here, Rochelle Fox and Wendy Kuo, who I believe are online, and of course Odile Joblin, who's sitting in the front, who you all know, and without whom this event would not have happened. So thank you to everybody, and I will pass it over now to Odile to introduce the rest of the morning, afternoon.
Thank you, Damon. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Again, I'd like to welcome you warmly to this final mini-symposium of the LEADS program. We have today the honor of welcoming returning trainees, the new trainees, so the new cohort, and we also have a few externals, I believe, people from the LSRC community and professors, of course, of the program. I will give a brief overview of the different elements of the LEADS program without repeating what has been said previously. LEADS, Leadership in Environmental and Digital Innovation for Sustainability, is a program at the intersection of climate science and digital innovations. We try to give elements of responses to how sustainability can be accelerated through the use of digital innovations, including artificial intelligence. And we also address a few questions about what are the potential negative impacts of digital on the world, such as the ones mentioned by Damon. And the program has been present since 2020, and since the start of the program, we have welcomed over 80 trainees in total Today we still have about 40 active trainees in the program coming from all 4 universities of Montreal. We also have students from many different disciplines. While a lot of you guys are coming from the environmental sciences, we also have people from the social sciences, the arts sciences, and many more, business, management, and so on, like computer sciences and many more. We are based in Montreal, and this is a growing concern all over the world. We're talking about the intersection between sustainability and AI and digital tools in many countries and in many institutions at the UN or even at European and international level. So hence the importance of a training program at this intersection. I will briefly give you a snapshot of the activities that we have without spending too much time, because I'm aware we also have non-leads people here in the audience. But just so you know, the activities are, we have like 4 core main activities, one being the leadership training workshop. This year, the leadership training workshop will be co-organized with Voltage. Voltage is an institute at Concordia working on sustainable electrification. And we have the dates already for this event, so if you want to already mark it down, but I will send everyone of the program an email with the dates and more details. But we have a date set, it's April 19 to 2025. 26, I'm sorry, I'm still stuck in 2025. It's mandatory for the trainees, so if you have not taken this component yet, this is your last chance, because this is the last time that we offer this, this training. But it's a really interesting one, and this year we will have the input of Voltage as well, so it will be a bit different. I warmly welcome the returning trainees to take it as well, because it will be very nice. The second one is the summer school. In 2025-2026, it will be slightly different. Instead of having a 2 weeks intensive summer school, the classes will be distributed and spread out across the year. We will have about 4 or 5 classes that are mandatory for the ones who have not taken the summer school yet. And for those who have taken it yet, but wish to participate because it's an interesting topic, there will be space available. And again, I will be sending the details of this as we get closer to the dates. Some trainings may be open to non-lead students as well, to students or researchers beyond our community. But again, if that's the case, I will be sharing these activities with the broader community. The third component are the speaker series. Those talks are scheduled every 1 or 2 months or so. I would like to remind you that 2 events, 2 speaker series per year are mandatory. We will have about maybe 5 this year, so if we're getting close to the end of the academic year and you still have to take those, make sure to anticipate that the last 2 months or 3 months of the academic year, you'll have to participate in those events. Lastly is the internship. A 200 hours internship required as part of the LEADS program. We can offer support for placement, so if you're looking for an internship in a field of your interest that matches the purpose of the program, you can always reach out to me, and then I'll do my best to help you find an internship that aligns with your objectives and your hobbies and also the topic of your research. And then we also have a couple of networking events, which are, I believe, which will be 2. There will be 2 this year, one next month, and then the other one closer to the end of the academic year. All the communication about these events will be sent to you through email. Emails is the main form of communication at Leeds. And if you have any question, you can always reach out to me. You have my email, I believe, and it's written right there. I think we have a couple of minutes for potential questions. If you want to ask questions to me or Damon, there is time for it at the end as well, during the break or during the lunch, because there will be a lunch served at 12:30 after the panel discussion. So how the event is going to look like for the next hour or so is that we will have 2 panel discussions with returning trainees speaking and talking about their research, giving you a snapshot of the different topics covered at Leeds. After the two panels, we have a fun activity planned here at the front, at the stage, like on the table, which I will explain to you later. And then lastly, we will conclude with lunch and some networking and chit-chat. So if you have any questions, come to me, come to Damon, or you can always email me as well. So is there any question now, or do you want to pursue with the panel discussions?
If you have any questions, just raise your hand. We'll run a mic over. Also, those on your line, if you want to pop it into the chat, we can bring it up on our screen and we can read it out.
We also have Zoom participation, so we might have questions from Zoom as well that I can pick up on during the panel discussions. Okay, if we don't have any questions, I'd like to move forward with the panel section of today. For the first panel, we have a panel that is all focused on capuchin monkeys. Capuchin monkeys in focus, conservation in a changing ecosystem. So for this first panel, I'd like to welcome on stage 4 students, researchers that are part of Sarah Turner's lab here at Concordia. I'd like to welcome Maya Moghrabi. She's a master's student in conservation and ecology at Concordia University. She's doing her research on the impacts of human-induced landscape changes on social tolerance in blonde capuchin in forest fragments. Maya, you can come up to the stage. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Nev Jevalikian Couture. She's a master's student in primatology at Concordia University, and her research is on how edge and succession effects influence spatial cohesion and social tolerance of blonde capuchins. Thirdly, we have Italo Ferreira. Italo is a PhD in behavioral ecology and conservation biology at Concordia. He researches how, the different responses of blonde capuchins to climate change, forest regeneration, and land use pressures using long-term field data and spatial modeling. And lastly, I'd like to welcome Ryan Ura. Ryan is a master's in geography, planning, and environment at Concordia, and his research is about teaching tool use to captive capuchins to improve welfare and increase the likelihood of successful reintroduction into the wild. So, as you know, this panel, as you've heard, this panel provides a multidimensional views of capuchin research spanning from fieldwork to behavioral studies, conservation modeling, and applied interventions. Maya and Nev will bring forward a narrative of a day in the field and how succession effects and landscape changes impact behavioral changes, including social tolerance of capuchin monkeys. Then we will have the input of Italo, who explores the broader environmental pressures and effective conservation modeling, while Ryan will share innovative behavioral training approaches and reintroduction strategies. So I'll pass the word to Maya and Nev to begin with.
Hello, everyone. So yes, today we are going to present you our project on how we study social tolerance in blonde capuchins in an Atlantic forest fragment, and for which we had the opportunity to spend this summer in Brazil doing data collection. So first of all, a little bit of context. Who are blonde capuchins? They are a small neotropical primate, so little monkey, that are recognizable mainly by their golden hair, black hands and feet. They usually have a white patch on their forehead and sometimes spots on their face. And the males have a visible throat sac. Unfortunately, they are recognized as an endangered species by the IUCN since 2020, so the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. Ecologically, they are a generalist arboreal species. What that means is that they range on a wide, they feed on a wide range of resources, mainly fruits, nuts, but also insects and other things. And while they sometimes go to the ground to forage, they spend most of their time in the trees. They are endemic to the northeast of the Atlantic forest. So endemic, what that means is that this is the only place where they are found. The Atlantic forest, I'm guessing most of you are familiar with the Amazon rainforest, but the Atlantic forest is another of Brazil's biomes, and it is also a world-recognized biodiversity hotspot. Unfortunately, only a little bit over 11% of its original area is left today, but it originally covered over 150 million hectares. So that's not great. And that is mainly due to intensive deforestation because of urban and agricultural developments. There are laws in place, but there are not that many, and enforcement is very limited. So our study site was a fragment of the Atlantic forest near the cities of Capora and Guayana. So it is at the top left. As you can see, we like to say that it's shaped like a pair of pants, so it can help you visualize it. The dashed line shows that the left leg belongs to the Pernambuco state and the right leg to the Paraíba state, and the right leg is where we did our data collection. It covers approximately 270 hectares. And it is surrounded by agricultural crops.
Okay, so now with that background, we're going to go over a bit what a day in the field looked like for us this summer. We did a method called scan sampling, which I'll explain a bit more later. When we would arrive to the field, we would have to find the group. So we would try to locate them with vocalizations. This could take anywhere between 10 minutes to 2 hours, or there was even a lucky few days where we didn't find them at all. When we did find them, we would go and try to locate the center of the group and position ourselves in the middle, and we would be back to back and begin the scan. And we would have to follow the group's movements, staying at the center of the group for the entirety of the scan. So what is a scan exactly? It's for 20 minutes. We follow the group and we take note of a few things, like the strata that each individual is found in of the forest, the distance they were to the observer, their age and sex class, and the behavior they were exhibiting, as well as their GPS point. So to do all this, we use an app called Locus Map 4. Using technology like this allowed for our data collection process to be way easier than if we had collected the GPS points on their own with the data for the scan on a paper and then having to automate everything ourselves later. This made for really easy and simpler, more organized data collection and really helped us locate the monkeys faster. In between each scan, we would wait for about 20 minutes. So sometimes that would involve just sitting around waiting for them while they're foraging, or it would involve following the group as they're moving. So it was about 20 minutes of scan or up until we recorded all of the monkeys, and then 20 minutes in between scans. And we would do this about 5 times a day for 5 days a week. But with the beauty of fieldwork is that weather and finding the monkeys changes every day. So it was about an average. Some days we would do more, some days we would do less, given the weather and how quickly we were able to find the monkeys. And one of the other aspects of our project was that we set up camera traps to observe and monitor what other animals were in this area of the forest. And so we could just keep an eye on what other animals they share their habitat with. Now for a bit of context before we present what our research questions were. As Nev mentioned, the fragment is surrounded by agriculture. In 2014, it was surrounded by small-scale sugar farming, and that only had 2 crop cycles. But by the time 2022 came around, it had been taken over by a large agro-industry company that drained the area for more intensive sugarcane farming. So that created a lot more erosion and a lot more sugarcane present in the area. So the animals started relying or foraging on sugarcane. In 2025, now when we were there, it's transitioning to small-scale farming, and there's hardly any sugarcane left. So this is a big change for the monkeys. Their surrounding habitat is changing a lot. So I'm looking at social tolerance for my research. Social tolerance refers to how individuals tolerate the presence and behaviors of others within their social group in relation to competition, aggression, and cooperation. High levels of social tolerance are important for group stability, for peaceful coexistence, and conflict management without escalating aggression. These are some behaviors like tolerant behaviors, affiliative behaviors, aggressive behaviors, and dominance and hierarchy that influence the group's total structural social tolerance. So my overall research question is, how do agricultural land use changes impact social tolerance among blonde capuchin monkeys in an Atlantic forest fragment? And now for Nev to explain some details of hers.
So I'm going to give you a bit more context to be able to understand my research question. First of all, what is edge effect? Edge effect is a sudden environmental change at the edge of a fragment. So for example, say you have a big piece of area of forest and you decide to cut it into two pieces to make a road in the middle of it. Maybe technically you'll still have the same total area of forest cover, but it's not going to be the same for the animals inside, because since you cut it in the middle, where you cut it, there's now more light that comes in, there's more wind. That also represents a way for predators to walk inside the middle of the forest. And so these environmental changes at the edge of a fragment is what we call edge effect. So that affects resource availability, it increases risks, and overall, the more you fragment an area, the higher edge to interior forest ratio you have. Then succession stages, are the process of recovery after a disturbance, so either anthropogenic or natural. If you decide to cut a forest, or if you have a forest fire or erosion because of a flood, anything that will take all the trees down. Basically, the succession is the stages by which the forest is going to grow again. As you can guess, it starts with little trees where there's nothing there, so mostly species that are very tolerant to sunlight, wind, etc. Over time, they're going to be overtaken by more slow-growing species, and this is how, over time, you can see that succession stages affects resource availability in canopy coverage, because it will basically change how much and of which species are in the forest, depending on if it's a young or an old forest. Usually we describe it by going through four stages, pioneer, intermediate, the climax, and eventually it reaches a stage where it can be considered an old growth forest. Spatial cohesion is simply the distance between individuals in a group, so it is impacted by what Maya explained, social tolerance. Food resources are at the root of it, but it is also risk sensitive, as with the individual's perception of risk and vigilance, maybe they will tend to stick more together, or if the resources are more scarce, maybe there's more competition, maybe they will need to fish in fusion. So that's what I'm looking at. And that being said, my research question is, how do succession and edge effects influence spatial cohesion and behavior of the endangered blonde capuchin monkeys in a fragmented Atlantic forest habitat? And now we are currently at the data analysis stage of it all. We'll be using more digital tools such as QGIS, Python, etc. And I also, for my research question, will be using a great tool developed by Jennifer Donini last year. Big thank you. That's an amazing tool she developed on the Google Earth Engine, and that I will be using to determine my points in my data, their succession stage and their proximity to the edge. So thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you both. I would like to pass the word to Italo, who is going to present his research now.
Um, Good morning, everyone. Continuing on the what you already heard from Nev and Maya, their work is very interesting, and this fragment that is located in Brazil has been studied for a while. We have a continuous research there since 2014, and our supervisor in Brazil for the research, like our co-supervisor there, she is habituating those monkeys since 2009. So it's a long time that this research has been going on, and because of that, there was a lot of data collection throughout all of those years. And my research was, I was seeing the impacts of the food abundance and the temperature on their space use. But this is something that has been studied for 10 years. So there's this huge data set of 10 years of data collection from 2014 to 2023. And when we think about the space use of animals, we tend to think that there are multiple factors that will influences their space use, like body weight, the forex structure, the fires, the diet, the group size. But something that we also have to put in consideration, especially in a time of climate change, is the temperature, and also how it's also affecting the abundance of food in those fragments, right? Because in fragmented areas, the animals, they have fewer options to change their area. There is a graded risk, and overall there is a low diversity of fauna and flora. And so this study, I was, as they were also doing when they were in Brazil, I was not me, but like many students from those 10 years, they collected fruit biomass, arthropod biomass, the temperature and the behavior of those animals in 10 years. And with that, I got two different predictions. My first prediction was that the monkeys would reduce their range when the fruit was scarce. And my second prediction was that when the temperatures was higher, they would reduce their range. But what we found of that was that actually the minimum temperature had a marginal effect on how the home range, in one of the measures that we had, that was when we do a calculation of the minimum convex polygon, which is like one of the geographical measures of creating an area, we actually found that the temperature had this marginally significant effect on their space area, which means that the higher the temperature, the minimum temperature, the more they would walk. The same thing was also seen for the maximum temperature in their home range. But what was very, very interesting for us to see was that the animals, they followed what we called an energy maximization strategy, which is that they walk more when the resource is scarce, in search of arthropods, like invertebrates, insects overall. And this is very interesting because it shows that those animals, they are relying on a lot of background food, fallback foods, such as, for example, when Nev was explaining about the sugarcane surrounding the fragment, those animals, they were also relying on arthropods to get their food. And so this brings a lot of questions and discussions that I think it would be very interesting for us to see in the future, especially into how we should act to preserve those animals that live in those fragments. Because if there is a low diversity and low biodiversity of food overall for them, and they're relying a lot on insects to eat, I think this highlights a lot of the importance that we have to, in the future, create those ecological corridors or create better connections. And even those very small fragments, they are very important for those species. So that's a message that I would think that a take-home message. Yeah, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Italo. I'll now pass the word to the final panelist of this first panel on capuchin monkeys, Ryan.
Thank you. So my research focused on social learning and tool use rehabilitation in captive capuchin monkeys. There we go. So generally I focused on several species of robust capuchins, but the main one I focused on was the bearded capuchin. And so the species I looked at are near threatened to endangered, and they're found in a variety of South American countries. But the ones that I focused on were obviously in Brazil. But three important things about them are they're social, they're intelligent, and they know how to use stones as tools. So rehabilitation allows us to teach these individuals natural behaviors that they're not already enacting. And rehabilitation, at least in my case, is very species specific. The protocol that we are undergoing is not going to work for snakes or birds. But it's not just about teaching animals what they need to know to get released. Some animals just aren't going to be released, and so you need to be able to care for and improve the lives of those that are going to stay in rehabilitation facilities. But ultimately, the goal is to restore behavioral competence, and so to make them act more like they would naturally. And so the potential benefits of my research, which was a protocol that we're hoping will work and can then be applied in other rehabilitation centers to improve the efficiency and success of rehabilitation, is that there can be an increased understanding of the effects of social tolerance on learning and the downstream effects on rehabilitation. We can look at the increasing the success rate of rehabilitation and release. We can teach important skills that these monkeys need to know. And we can look at if specific training improves releasability or if we should just be focusing on general behaviors, general foraging, general movement. And so why is tool use and nut cracking so important for me? It's because it's a natural behavior. It allows access to fallback foods, as Italo was talking about. And so these foods are ones that are just uncommon. They're still normally found in the environment, but they're harder to eat or not as good as, say, like an apple, something that's very nutritious and just easy to eat. The nuts that I'm teaching them how to open are macaibas, so they're very hard, and they have two shells. There's this outer shell that they can kind of crack open, even with their hand or just like slamming it on the ground or with their mouth. But then there's this inner core that inside that has a very nutritious center, and so they need to use the rocks to crack them open. And so the first step of my research was to train myself and other researchers. So you had to be able to identify the monkeys, identify their behaviors, know all the behaviors that we're looking at, and come to an agreement with everybody doing the research. So there were several of us. Viviani was out there helping me. There was Kevin, Laura, Marina, and Priscilla. And so there was a lot of us looking at all these monkeys. So we had to agree on what we're seeing so that way our data was valid. So the first step after that was the baseline and afternoon stage, where we looked at each monkey for 5 minutes individually and just kind of wrote down everything that they're doing. And so we looked at all the individuals. We went and did 2 rounds. So we looked at each monkey once, and then we started again after we finished the last one. And so this was just to be able to understand the behavioral repertoire prior to our training protocol to see how did they act just normally at the rehabilitation center. And so we were taking this data on iPads using an app called Animal Behavior Pro, and it's an amazing thing because normally if you're just writing down the time, the behavior, the individual, all this data, it's just too much and you're going to lose data. So this just allows you to quickly tap in. You can tap who they're interacting with, the behaviors, and it'll automatically input the time it started and everything like that. And then after the training stage or the baseline, we would have afternoon sessions just following the same protocol, where we still left the anvils and hammers in that I'll talk about now. So for phase 1, after the baseline, is where we introduce the rocks and the nuts into the enclosures for the monkeys. And so we introduced 2 large anvils, so they were giant, like 15-kilogram rocks that we just left on the ground. And we introduced 1 hammerstone that was maybe 2 kilograms. They always varied because you're using different hammers. And each individual got one of those and 5 macaiba nuts. And so during this training phase, we originally wanted to have every individual being looked at, but sadly there is a lot of issues with setting up cameras and enclosures. A lot of the time you're gonna have to take apart the enclosure, and that's just not possible when you have 12 monkeys and nowhere else to move them. So we only focused on 3 individuals per group, and we just watched them the entirety of the 3 months. And we did focals on them for about 20 minutes. And one of these was recorded. I'm hoping this is gonna play. Oh, thank you. Oh. No, it won't play. Oh, okay. Well, this was just a video showing the monkey. It was using the nut. It just using a rock. It lifts it up and just kind of crushes it onto the nut that was sitting on another rock. So using one rock as an anvil and one as a hammer. And then phase 2, we still had the same amount of macaibas, but we opened up about a quarter of them just to show them that there was the edible core inside, hoping that this would allow them to associate that there's a highly nutritious highly nutritious part inside the nuts. And so this would encourage them to start cracking open the nuts more often. And then phase 3, we had individuals showing the monkeys how to open the nuts. So using a human as the demonstrator, hoping this would teach them if they were not yet proficient. And then this was just another video showing one of the monkeys successfully cracking open one of the nuts and getting the inside. So far, what we found is there is an increase in manipulation over time. They're not just manipulating the rocks, but their environment and sticks or leaves that fall into the environments as well. We're also looking at seeing if the success rate changes over time, and so far we found that success rate using stones to crack open nuts has improved, but only in some individuals. And then we have other areas to look at still. Are more socially tolerated individuals? Are they more competent? Are they more successful? Are there group dynamic differences? Is the first enclosure different from the second, different from the third? Are there differences across age and sex? And so many other things. And ultimately, our goal is to see if the protocol can be applied to other rehabilitation centers and increase release success and welfare, if it is successful.
Thank you so much, Ryan. So our panelists gave us an overview of a lot of things that they study related to the capuchin monkeys, going from social tolerance to reintroduction and in general the impacts of environmental change on those communities. You've all mentioned a lot about several aspects of your research, including the field work, observation, data collection, and a lot of you use digital tools in your research, including for the data collection, the data analysis. You use GPS tracking, remote sensing. I'm curious to know a little bit more about how these tools facilitate and really help for your research, as well as the potential impacts or the potential difficulties that you encounter using those tools, especially when working with monkeys that are crawling around, and it might be difficult to keep track of everything when there's monkeys everywhere. So I'm curious to know about the pluses, like how it helps with the research, but also how it can be kind of like a difficulty with your research.
First of all, I think that those digital tools, they're very revolutionary in terms of field research, because imagine that before those apps, like the ones that Nev and Maya was showing, like the locus map, we used to have a paper in which we would walk inside the forest and then we'd point the direction in which the monkey was, and we would put in the corner saying, okay, this is the north, and then we had to go home and then transcribe this data into the computer, and it was not very accurate, like, but it was what we had. Like in many researches, like all over the world, this is like still being done actually. Locus map was actually something that I discovered when I was doing a bit of research too, because I was like, oh, I mean, I was a bit lazy at the time, thinking like, okay, I don't want to do this manually. I need to make my life easier. So this tool actually is very helpful. I don't even think that the initial purpose of the app was to be used like that, and it's a powerful tool. And overall, I think like some of the challenges of using a tool like that inside the forest when you're looking at monkeys is that you're like all the time you're in danger of falling into the ground and like hurting yourself. So it's always important to be very careful. I for these specific tools, I think they don't pose a lot of like environmental threat or something, since we're just like using the sheets and our computer. But yeah, I think they're pretty great. Like, and I think Ryan can say a bit more about like how it's collecting the data in the rescue centers. Like, I think it's a bit different too, and maybe you can say a bit more about your experiences too.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to do research in the past, also fieldwork, and so technology is just generally a great help, I find. Having to handwrite everything and then go home and transcribe it and put it into, Excel or whatever you're using is a lot of time. And so having an app or whatever that will just, do the writing for you, saves you time there. It allows your data to be more accurate. It allows you to collect more of that data. But it just saves you so much time. And you get to go home and actually enjoy your night off. You don't have to spend hours going over what you just did during the day and writing it again onto a computer. But I mean, there are still, obvious downsides with using technology. There were still rainy days, so it's hard to take videos in the rain if you don't have a waterproof camera, or if you're using an iPad and the water gets on the screen, your tapping doesn't necessarily work anymore. So sometimes, you still want the write in rain notebook that allows you to use a pencil and a paper, even if it gets a little bit wet. But yeah, I think overall, technology is just a benefit. I couldn't imagine having to do the statistics by hand. R is a blessing.
Yes, I think just to add on to what Italo and Ryan were saying, technology really is amazing in our case, mostly because, yes, transcribing data is really long and demanding, even if it is just saying monkey 1 eating fruit. But when it's about geographical analysis with coordinates and geographic system points, that would require hours and hours and the tiniest mistake and then nothing works. So the way Italo was describing it with the paper, I think can give you an idea of how easier this tool makes our life. And as Odile was saying, we're looking at little monkeys that are running everywhere, hiding in the trees, don't necessarily want to be seen, or are really far away. So we would have to be like, okay, a monkey 50 meters away. Who are, like, how old? Are you a male, a female? What age category? What are you doing? What direction on the compass? How far you are away from me? That's a lot of things that you have to assess at the same time, and the use of a tool that can just already tell you where you are and already give you the option to enter it really quickly, that just facilitates things a lot. And for some downsides, I mean, technology is advancing at an incredible rate, but there are still some things that are not perfect when it comes to geographical, like coordinates. There is an uncertainty, so when we're looking at a really fine scale, like distance between individuals that are very close one to another, maybe with the satellites, you'll have like a buffer of uncertainty for a monkey. Maybe I'll put the point there, but maybe what it's going to enter in the system. Maybe the monkey is actually 2 meters to the left of what I entered in the system. And in the end, well, that creates for sure an uncertainty in the analysis. But for a bigger scale group dynamic analysis, it is really, really useful.
Yeah, thanks all. Now, your research touches on the question of conservation efforts facing environmental changes and how it impacts ecosystems, including species and capuchin monkeys, but I'm sure there is many more animal species that are impacted by environmental change and climate change and everything. I'm curious to know how you think that your insights can inform broader policy initiatives and policies in conservation efforts.
Primates overall, they're cute. So I think this is like a thing that sells very well. So primates, they're cute. There are those animals that look like humans. So when we're looking at this small fragment of Atlantic forest in the middle of nowhere, like surrounded by sugarcane, you might think like, okay, yeah, this will be just sugarcane in the future. Like, but when you walk in a forest like this, every day you see a different species. Every day. Every day you see something different. Like every day you see a new bird, a new plant. So those primates, they act as flagship species. So by protecting those animals, we're actually protecting the whole forest. Protecting the monkeys is just an excuse to protect the forest too. Like it's, I mean, they're lovely, but also like the other animals are too. So by protecting them, we're protecting all of them.
I also think the fragment where we were working, where I mentioned that was surrounded by agricultural crops that are fields that are probably going to be sold to private companies in the future, and the erosion caused by the management of the land there for agriculture is a big problem for the forest. So when we are studying and documenting this, we are not only helping the monkeys by protecting this, but we're hopefully building tools to implement better management of the land in the area, and hopefully this will allow us to work in collaboration with different parties that are involved in this whole beautiful thing that is managing the earth. But obviously everyone has different interests and it is difficult, but by building these tools, I think we will be able to hopefully better implement legislation or better plan together a better future for all of the species that live in that area.
Thank you so much. Yes, it's interesting to see that when you protect one species, you actually protect many others because everything is interconnected. I guess we have a little bit of time to open questions from the audience. You can do that by raising your hand. And we have a team also taking care of potential online questions. If you have a question, yeah, we have one in the back.
I know that I've heard that in Peru at least, capuchin monkeys are often taken for the exotic pet industry. Is that something that's common to the Atlantic forest too?
I mean, at least for my rehabilitation work, most of the monkeys we're working with are from the pet trade. And because they're found in the Atlantic forest, I would agree that, yeah, it's a pretty big problem, but the government is working really hard to fight against it, and improvements are being made every day, especially with the work that is being done.
In relation to your guys' research, I'm also curious to know if there's documented impacts on the behavior, like if you might be able to detect in areas with a lot of poaching, or like if that would influence the behavior of the monkeys in their use of the canopy. Or
What do you want to say?
Okay. A fun fact of my work is that we found that very interestingly, the monkeys, their core area, the area in which they use the most, it's located in the parts of the forest that are the most preserved. So yeah, like if we think about the protection of those more secondary forests surrounding those more like preserved forests, you might think, okay, yeah, you just need to preserve this core area. But if it wasn't for those surrounding areas, the border effect would be huge. Those monkeys, they're like already suffering a lot with this border effect. But in this specific area, we didn't see much of like poaching because it's a small place. But we've seen hunters before. We actually have suffered threats from the hunters to like we have some signs there saying this place is the home of many lives protected, and then there's like bullet holes because of the hunters threatening us. So it's a combination of things. Yeah.
That, yeah, we didn't see anything firsthand, but when we survey the forest for other ecological indicators, we did see that they ripped down the signs that we had hung up on the trees, like identifying the tree. So they started carving into the tree the name, because there's someone that came and helped identify everything, and then by them ripping off the tags, it's obviously making it very difficult to keep up with that research. So I don't think any direct threat with poaching, but I think that obviously our presence there is a bit, I mean, now it's better that they talk with the farmers, but obviously the farmers feel very passionate. That's their livelihood surrounding the fragment. So we're working to bridge the gap between the farmers, who are the ones that are in most direct contact with the monkeys.
And I am aware that this does not exactly answer your question, but more in the direction of what you asked about behavior. Well, Ryan saw in his rehab center different behaviors of monkeys that suffered from the pet trade and how hard it is to rehabilitate them. And in our case, I wanted to say it is not directly because of the poaching, but about the habituation. When we were there, we definitely saw just the impact of the human presence around them. They have a very low perspective of like risk and vigilance. So sometimes like farmers, not necessarily like people who poach, but are going to be working, and monkeys, even little like mamas carrying their baby, will just cross the street in front of a truck with her baby, taking like huge risk to walk into an open area to go grab food. Like they seem to have really lost a big part of their perception of risk, and that is a way that their behavior was affected, I guess, by our presence.
Yes, I'd like to see if there's any other questions from the audience.
Just as a continuation to the behavior you were just describing, between those habitat patches where there's kind of these ecological corridors, are you seeing more kind of, I guess, risk averse or risky, like aggressive behaviors between the monkeys, or are they kind of just not traveling between those patches, or are they traveling quickly, or just what kind of the connectivity between the patches looks like, or are you not observing them?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Unfortunately, we're a bit limited in the ways that we can answer your question because we focused on one fragment, and they are like kind of trapped there. There's no connectivity to much things, but it does highlight the importance of connectivity between fragments or different parts. For example, just the pants that I was talking about, the two legs, we focused on the population in the right leg, but often we would see them communicating with the unhabituated population in the left leg. So there's definitely something happening. They will also try to like walk out in between the legs to get more food, but they eventually don't because it's just too risky. But more and more they try. So there is the importance of connecting fragments, but since it is not really our context, we can't really answer that. But also, it's not really none of our researches, but let's say if there's more aggressive behaviors at the edge, for example, to kind of answer your question, Jefferson here in the audience, for example, is studying how competition for foraging different types of food resources at the edge versus inside the forest. And maybe he could tell you more about it later, but yeah.
Talking about the ecological corridors, this area is located within the range of preservation area. So this area where we studied this population is actually inside a private land. But there are projects from IBAMA, which is the Brazilian organism for organizing the land protection and environmental protection. And there is a few projects that it's already created, the maps showing where we could create the ecological corridors to connect those multiple fragments, because some of those fragments there are empty. They're just like a small patch of forest, but there isn't a big population of multiple species of animals. So by highlighting this specific population, we could put even more pressure into connecting those small fragments to this more continuous part that is like nearby. And I think this is very important to discuss.
Okay, before we wrap up, I'll just have a final question briefly, very briefly, so that we can jump to the next panel. Yes.
Thank you very much for your most wonderful and really dedicated research. So my question is related to the ecological corridor system and the bylaws and regulation to transporting species of, I'm into forestry, so, and species of birds, so species of trees, etc. So to explain to you that we are here in what we call the boreal forest. So there are specific trees. When you work in architecture and design, you spec a tree according to zone, right? So we are being invaded. So there is a difference between boreal and Bornean forest, which is a more tropical forest. We are being invaded by species here with they're putting them under the umbrella of indigenous, but they're actually coming from, interbred from a more tropical area and an African. So there are little amphids that are inhabiting. So we have one here, I'm from Laval, we have one that's has a tropical long leaf, and it has a fluffy red thing. So somebody thought that this was the good solution to the fall, the changing of the colors. We don't want it here. So how is the regulation? How is this working? How do they transport these species here? And how do they get municipal authorization to plant them in the area? Because they're not indigenous to the Canadian, to the Borealan forest. They come from a tropical area. How do you feel about this? I just want to know that you're studying the ecological corridor.
I will try my best to answer. This is a bit outside of the range of our research. But just to make sure, your question is how do I feel about these species being important here in Canada? I have to admit that is not my. Yeah, I don't know much about the legislation about when they are being transported. That is very interesting, though. I will look it up. Because we're talking about bringing them into Canada, but what I can talk about is when I was in Brazil, and there is legislation, but I can say that in most places it was not so great, and we're working with what we have. So even in Brazil, sometimes some companies will give us trees to plant into our fragment, and I'd be like, oh, like, is this species indigenous? And my supervisor would be like, no, not really, so we won't plant it in the forest. But we could, like, that would have been easy to plant them. So there is legislation. I don't know the transportation in Canada. I can't talk about that. Probably is more strict, but in Brazil, there is definitely ways to bypass most of the legislation about indigenous or not species that we plant into those protected or that areas that we wish to protect.
Thank you for those elements of responses. Again, I'd like to warmly thank our 4 panelists for this first panel, Maya, Nev, Italo, and Ryan. Thank you so much. And for the second panel, we will zoom out a little bit and cover other topics in relationship with resilience and sustainability adaptation. For this next panel, ce deuxième panel sera bilingue, puisque nous avons un intervenant francophone parmi nous aussi. Pour ce deuxième panel, j'aimerais bien accueillir Martin Zoria, PhD candidate in industrial engineering at Concordia University, researching how carbon performance can be integrated in aviation supply chains. Secondly, I'd like to welcome Maika Pavlidis, a master's student in forest ecology at McGill University. J'aimerais accueillir Nixon Genty, qui est un candidat au doctorat en géographie à l'Université de Montréal. Il recherche et il étudie les challenges de la planification urbaine dans le contexte d'urbanisation rapide au Cap Haïtien. And lastly, I would like to cite the 4th panelist, who unfortunately will not be able to join today because she's a little bit sick, but I would like to present her research. She's researching developing community-based urban greening scenarios for Laval using participatory governance and environmental justice framework. I believe Nixon is in the room. Nixon? Okay. While Nixon is getting ready, I would like to describe briefly the panel. Our second panel brings together researchers who approach sustainability from very different angles: ecology, engineering, and urban planning. What connects them all is a shared focus on how systems adapt and transform in response to climate and social pressures. Whether it's trees competing for light, cities growing fast, or global supply chains shifting towards low carbon models, each of our panelists studies resilience and what it takes to build a sustainable future across different scales. I will pass the word to our first panelist, Martin, who is going to present his research.
Hello. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, Odile, the organizing committee, Dr. Matthews for the invitation. Thanks so much for the support. Well, as mentioned before, I'm Martin Zorrilla, a PhD student in industrial engineering at Concordia University. And broadly speaking, my research focuses on understanding the potential environmental effect of operational uncertainty in emerging aviation decarbonization strategies. So, aviation can be sometimes technically a very technical issue. However, all our activities and our activities and the environment we live in are affected, are connected with aviation industry. So CO2 emissions coming from aviation are considered as a factor for the global warming, which in turn alters or changes the environmental condition in which these aviation activities take place. So just to give you some examples, during my experience flying in my country, I would like to share with you those cases. An Air Force base next to Bogota, the capital city from Colombia, the country where I come from. The runway is decommissioned for the medium-haul aircraft operation since 2000. Due to the increasing average temperatures, which reduced the usable landing and takeoff distance. San Andres Island, the main tourist destination in the country. Unfortunately, in about 30 years, both the runway threshold will be covered by the sea level. Okay, Manizales, a mid-sized city in the mountains. So in airports like this, the runway must be relocated due to the increasing thunderstorms along the trajectory, partially due to the climate change. So with that in mind, all the, there are a variety of several initiatives to address the problem. However, most of them have failed in being adopted. Why? We think that maybe the national strategies differ significantly from one country to another, and the uncertainty is involved in the equation. Uncertainty is something intangible and very complex to deal with, even more when you don't know the nature of that complexity. So in my research, I try to measure the uncertainty involved in the supply chain in adopting these strategies. Let me see if I can snap it. And basically what I'm trying to do is to look at the problem in two different angles. In the first, I'm trying to look at the first case scenario. So for the countries like Colombia, where the manufacturing an aircraft is not the best solution, but maybe is in the plan of development to decarbonize the aviation. So manufacturing a small aircraft could be a potential solution to decarbonize aviation. So I try to design a new way to look at the problem in dealing with a novel supply chain model to manufacture the aircraft here, and to estimate the potential impact of that solution. So most of the small aircraft are imported in the country. So in that case, I try to look at the problem in a different way. In the second case, sorry, it's not. I'm sorry. In the second case, I try to use the same approach to understand the way in which a feedstock known as stop changing. Okay.
We just have a little PowerPoint technical problem here. We're gonna fix it. Just hold up.
So in the second case, I address the problem of producing canola oil-based sustainable aviation fuel for Canada. And by addressing that problem, I try to estimate the potential emission outcomes for that supply chain, assuming that Canada, the sustainable aviation fuel will be produced locally instead of being imported. So in that case, the scenario will change. So that's basically my approach to do that. So in regions like Saskatchewan or Manitoba, you can see that the airports are far away from that areas. I try to model the supply chain, introducing uncertainty in the demand, some location parts, and yeah, maybe more yield production in order to estimate that potential change. So I firmly believe that I could contribute to a better environment by addressing the problem in aviation.
Yep, thank you so much. On to the next panelist, Micah.
Wait for the slides. Okay. Hello, my name is Micah. I'm going to talk to you guys about my master's project, which is about the tree community and the Galt Nature Reserve on Mont Saint-Hilaire. It's an ecosystem that maybe some of you have visited. It's right outside the city, and when you stand by the lake, you have the impression when you're in this basin that you're in kind of an unending forest, which is an image that's very quickly shattered if you step outside the reserve. This photo is taken from the parking lot of a Metro grocery store and really emphasizes the fact that the forest is a standout landscape feature compared to the rest of the land around it. Those steep slopes are in part what has saved the forest from being logged, unlike the rest of the land around, which has been cut at some point in recent history. If we zoom out to satellite imagery, we can see even more that this is really a remaining island of forest in a landscape that's otherwise dominated completely by agricultural and urban sprawl, which kind of leaves us with the question. This is an old growth forest, to my knowledge, the largest remaining patch of old growth forest, temperate old growth forest in the region. So on one hand, we have this forest that's expected to stay somewhat stable based on ecological theory through time, but it's also it's hemmed in on all sides by anthropogenic stressors, which leads me to the main questions I want to come to today with you guys, which is, can we detect a response to stressors in the forest tree community, and what metrics enable us to best pick up the signals of this change? The data that I'm using is from a series of permanent tree plots that were set up in the late 1990s in the reserve, and we can look at metrics. We can look at change in this forest through time via a number of metrics on different resolutions. At a broad resolution, we might be interested to know if the biomass that's stored in the forest has changed through time, and we can use a proxy such as the basal area, which is simply the sum of the cross-sectional area of all the trees within a certain area. You can think of it as a proxy for, oops, I'm pressing buttons. You can think of it as a proxy for biomass, and if we look at change through time, based on my preliminary results, it seems like we have relatively little change in this metric, or maybe even a slight increase in the amount of biomass stored in these plots. Each line here is a plot through time, and on average, there's not a whole lot of change, which is pretty impressive considering that this forest has been in the path of the record-breaking 1998 ice storm, increasing numbers of invasive pests such as the emerald ash borer, huge overpopulation of white-tailed deer, and then, of course, climate change and an increasing frequency of extreme climate events. So we're pretty impressed at the resilience of this forest, but we want to look under the hood a little bit more and see what metrics are are leading to the patterns that we see. If we look at the density of pretty much just is the number of trees in our larger trees, our big mature trees, and then stems that are slightly smaller, we can see that the abundance of stems of these sizes have remained pretty constant through time, which might explain, well, that does explain why the biomass has remained pretty stable, because these are the size classes that will have the most biomass. However, if we look at stems that are a bit smaller, say our juveniles in the population, we do see a big fluctuation in the density of these stems. And this could mean a number of things. You know, maybe there's just been a big mortality event of young stems over time. Perhaps there was a lot of growth, and some of these stems that were here have grown into the next size class, or perhaps there's just no new young trees being recruited into the population. So ideally, we want to be able to get at the mortality and growth rates that underlie these changes in community structure. And luckily, with my data set, we have every single tree has its own tag, so we can look and say that tree died in this survey interval, this new tree was born in this survey interval, and we can compare the mortality and recruitment rates. You can think of this pretty much as mortality versus birth rates. And in a stable community that we might expect an old growth forest to be, we would expect the community mean in black to hover somewhere around this 1-to-1 line. However, between 1996 and 2002, we see that there's this huge boom in recruitment of new trees and lower mortality across most species. But this is a trend that gradually decays over time with decreasing recruitment and increased mortality across a lot of species, which leads us to what the forest looks like today, which is a pretty depauperate understory with very few young trees, and we've lost some of the stratified canopy structure that we might expect from an old growth forest. The remainder of my project, my analyses, I want to get deeper into these trends, look at size-specific and more species-specific trends to hopefully say a little bit more and generate some more hypotheses as to why we see this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Micah. Nous allons maintenant entendre le dernier panéliste de ce panel, Nixon. À toi.
Merci. Oui, et ma communication s'articule autour de la thématique suivante, analyse des défis de la planification urbaine dans le contexte d'urbanisation rapide du Cap-Haïtien, métropole de la région nord d'Haïti. Maintenant, cette communication va se dérouler sur ces 4 points essentiels. Dans un premier temps, après avoir relaté la problématique de la question, on va essayer de faire une mise en contexte et analyser les enjeux de l'urbanisation haïtienne. Dans un second temps, on va essayer de voir l'évolution de la situation en Haïti. Et en troisième lieu, nous allons essayer d'analyser la ville haïtienne comme espace d'exclusion et de vulnérabilité. Et ensuite, voir comment les aménagements se font, est-ce qu'il y a des règles, etc. Donc c'est ça qu'on va traiter dans ce point, une urbanisation sans urbanisme. Donc avant de mettre un terme à notre exposé. Maintenant, la question de l'urbanisation, bien que c'est un phénomène très ancien, qui remonte depuis la révolution agricole du néolithique, et apparaît comme un phénomène relativement récent en Haïti. Donc jusqu'à 1900, je dirais 50, bon, même 1980, et le taux d'urbanisation en Haïti restait très faible puisque 90% de la population vivait encore dans les espaces ruraux. Donc à partir de l'occupation américaine en 1915, qui va durer 19 ans jusqu'à 1934, eh bien, pour le besoin de l'occupation, on a commencé par centraliser le pays à Port-au-Prince, parce que je dois vous dire, pendant tout le 19e siècle, c'est-à-dire de 1804 qui marque l'indépendance d'Haïti, jusqu'à l'occupation américaine en 1915, donc on avait un système régionalisé, c'est-à-dire les services administratifs, les activités économiques, etc. se faisaient dans chaque région du pays. Le pays était divisé en plusieurs régions. Mais à partir de 1915, on a supprimé la régionalisation au profit de la métropolisation, de la centralisation. Donc, le pouvoir politique, le pouvoir économique, les activités culturelles, tout se concentre à Port-au-Prince. Maintenant, à partir de cette période-là, eh bien, on commence par créer une dynamique qui commence par décourager les gens des campagnes. Et au moment où nous parlons, donc la tendance a radicalement changé puisque l'urbanisation devient le phénomène le plus en vogue en Haïti. Alors, la question qu'on doit se poser, c'est comment cette croissance est rapide et en quelque sorte et rend ou bien impacte la population ou bien le développement national et en créant justement une certaine vulnérabilité par rapport aux catastrophes et aussi par rapport à l'intégration économique de la population. Et maintenant, alors ça c'est la carte des régions d'Haïti, puisque c'est un pays qui est divisé en 10 départements. Donc là, nous travaillons à la partie en bleu, ça représente le département du Nord, donc qui a pour principale métropole Cap-Haïtien sur lequel porte notre recherche. Mais maintenant, vous voyez, par exemple, le département de l'Ouest, là où se trouve la capitale. Donc, c'est le cœur du pays, mais c'est aussi le cœur du problème et le cœur de la pauvreté aussi d'Haïti. Maintenant, là, par exemple, si nous regardons l'évolution de l'espace urbain haïtien, alors j'ai essayé de diviser cette évolution-là en 5 grandes périodes. La première période qui débute avec l'indépendance jusqu'à 1915, donc c'est un territoire à dominance rurale. Pendant toute cette période-là, la croissance est lente. Donc la deuxième période de 1915 à 1950, il y a une tentative de modernisation du pays avec différents gouvernements, avec l'occupation, puisqu'il y a des infrastructures qui ont été mises en place à la capitale, il y a des routes qui ont été construites, il y a aussi des hôpitaux qui ont été construits, etc. Eh bien, toute cette dynamique va participer à la centralisation et lorsque la dictature des Duvalier va s'imposer, donc il va y avoir une hypercentralisation parce que Duvalier ne voulait pas que les commandants des régions aient un minimum, je dirais, d'indépendance pour ne pas toucher à son pouvoir personnel et il s'ensuit une hypertrophie urbaine, c'est-à-dire toutes les activités économiques, toutes les activités politiques, industrielles, etc. vont se concentrer à Port-au-Prince au détriment des villes secondaires, donc à Cap-Haïtien, qui en est la deuxième. Et maintenant, de 1950 à 1980, on va assister à un déclin du monde rural et à la pauvreté, à la misère qui s'accélère dans ces espaces-là. Et il va y avoir un exode rural massif et des vagues migratoires vers les autres pays de la Caraïbe, de l'Amérique latine, aux États-Unis, etc. Et ensuite, la croissance va atteindre justement un rythme accéléré jusqu'à 25%. Et ça, c'est je pourrais dire, c'est le début, n'est-ce pas, de l'accélération de ce processus d'urbanisation d'Haïti. Et de 1980 à 2010, Et il va y avoir tout un ensemble de crises structurelles, de stabilité, de coups d'État, d'occupation étrangère, et il va y avoir une nouvelle accélération de ce processus avec une sorte d'informalisation donc, qui s'étend dans tous les compartiments du pays. Donc l'urbanisation atteint alors sa vitesse de croisière avec plus de 40%. Et maintenant, de 2010, c'est-à-dire date qui marque le tremblement de terre qui a dévasté toute la capitale, environ 300 000 morts, etc., jusqu'au moment où nous parlons. Donc, il y a cette catastrophe naturelle, ces crises politiques récurrentes et mouvements sociaux qui vont entraîner des vagues migratoires, des violences partout dans le pays. Et là, on assiste justement à des villes qui deviennent, je dirais, débordées par, si vous voulez, par des gens venus de différents endroits, etc. Donc, ça veut dire que selon un dernier rapport publié par la Banque mondiale sur les villes haïtiennes en 2017, donc aujourd'hui, le taux d'urbanisation atteint 64% et ça continue de progresser. Et maintenant, si vous regardez la projection de la population, alors, je rappelle qu'en Haïti, il y a eu 4 grands recensements généraux. 4 grands recensements généraux, 1950, 1970, 1980. Et c'est à partir de 2003 qu'on atteint les 7 millions. Et aujourd'hui, selon les projections de l'Institut haïtien de statistique et d'informatique, donc nous sommes à 11 800 000 habitants. Et maintenant, si vous regardez ce tableau-là, vous pouvez avoir, par exemple, vous pouvez voir, si vous voulez, comment ça a progressé, comment le taux a progressé. Donc, en moins de 25 ans, justement, le taux a presque doublé. Donc, ensuite, à partir de 2003, c'est encore presque doublé. Donc, ça, c'est quand même un phénomène qui est vraiment préoccupant. Alors, comment évolue la tâche urbaine à Port-au-Prince? Alors, la partie la plus foncée en rouge, justement, ça représente la ville initiale qui a été érigée en 1770. Et dans un second temps, la partie en orange, justement, représente la deuxième taxe, c'est-à-dire il y a une expansion de la ville. Et ensuite, vers les années 2000, vous allez voir, jusqu'à 2010, eh bien, toute la partie en jaune, donc ça devient occupé par des gens. Et ensuite, pour le Cap haïtien, donc voici comment ça évolue également. Donc Cap haïtien, c'est la ville historique, c'est la première ville coloniale, etc., la première capitale. Et ensuite, ça a évolué de la même manière. Donc aujourd'hui, presque du nord au sud, de l'est à l'ouest, eh bien, ça continue de progresser, mais sans vraiment comment dire, un réel aménagement, donc d'ordonnancement, etc. Ça, ces images-là représentent, par exemple, Port-au-Prince après le 12 janvier. La photo est à gauche, ça représente les campements urbains, donc après la catastrophe naturelle. Et à droite, justement, cette photo représente une zone qui, avant le 12 janvier, qui n'était pas habitée, ça s'appelle Canaan, et maintenant les réfugiés du 12 janvier qui étaient sans abri, etc., allaient justement se reposer ici, et ça devient un véritable bidonville aujourd'hui qui abrite plus de 300 à 400 000 habitants aujourd'hui, mais sans une intervention réelle de l'État. Et maintenant, dans le cadre de la reconstruction de Port-au-Prince après le 12 janvier, donc on a reçu près de 13 milliards d'aides internationales. Donc le gouvernement ou encore les bailleurs, voici ce qu'ils ont proposé comme élément, je dirais, comme habitat pour les gens sans abri, etc. Donc, à regarder ça représente véritablement un cimetière à ciel ouvert, etc. Donc, il n'y a pas vraiment de marché, il n'y a pas de service public, il n'y a plus rien, il y a que ça, d'accord? Donc, en termes environnementaux, alors le coût, ça s'appelle le village Luman Casimir, c'est 3,5 milliards de dollars, donc que ça coûte, ce que vous voyez là, donc selon le gouvernement. Et maintenant, nous revenons à Cap-Haïtien. Donc, comment dire, une vue générale de Cap-Haïtien, de l'agglomération du Cap-Haïtien. Donc, quand vous regardez ça, ça vous donne une idée de l'ampleur de cette catastrophe qui s'annonce. Et maintenant, alors, nous sommes encore Cap-Haïtien, donc ça, c'est une rivière qui traverse le Cap-Haïtien en deux à gauche, et à droite, c'est un bidonville, justement, au pied du monde du Cap-Haïtien, justement. Alors, la ville se trouve en bas, et ce monde-là est totalement, alors qu'il devait être protégé, constitué, par exemple, une couverture pour protéger la ville contre les inondations, etc. Donc, c'est complètement occupé par des gens sans intervention réelle de l'État. Alors, en conclusion, qu'est-ce qu'on peut dire? L'urbanisation haïtienne, c'est une urbanisation marquée par l'absence de planification, et la centralisation autour de Port-au-Prince a engendré de profondes inégalités sociales et territoriales. Et Cap-Haïtien, autrefois considéré comme ville historique, touristique, culturelle, etc., donc illustre bien sûr la même trajectoire que Port-au-Prince, et connaît aujourd'hui une extension désordonnée, une dégradation environnementale et des infrastructures toujours défaillantes. Donc face à cela, il faudrait justement réfléchir comment dire, à un urbanisme résilient, durable, équitable, pour restaurer, si vous voulez, cet espace urbain et aussi assurer la résilience des populations. Donc voilà ce que comment dire, ma communication ou bien ma recherche, donc entend proposer comme réflexion, comme idée. Voilà.
Un tout grand merci, Nixon. Nous avons entendu 3 perspectives très diverses sur les implications du changement climatique pour les villes, les écosystèmes ou les chaînes d'approvisionnement. J'aimerais poser une question peut-être pour conclure et pour essayer de trouver une ligne conductrice au travers de ces 3 thématiques, poser la question suivante. Est-ce que vous pensez qu'il y a des constats ou des leçons qui peuvent être retenues au travers de vos 3 présentations? Donc, quels sont selon vous les défis ou les solutions communes entre vos 3 enjeux? Maybe in English briefly, you've all shared very different perspectives on different impacts of environmental change on ecosystems, global supply chains, and cities. What could be common lessons that could be drawn from across those 3 topics, in your opinion?
Dans ton projet, Nixon, j'ai entendu avec le fichier, on a vraiment, on peut suivre l'histoire qui nous mène à ce qu'on voit aujourd'hui. Et peut-être ça serait une première leçon, c'est de lire et comprendre l'histoire. Je dirais le même pour mon projet. C'est difficile à comprendre l'endroit où on est maintenant, dans cette forêt, si on ne comprend pas la trajectoire qui nous a menés aujourd'hui.
Well, thank you. I also remembered one of the books that I recently read, the Black Swan. So basically, we live in chaotic times where, despite the tools, it is an unpredictable world, and we're facing some of the biggest challenge in history. And maybe our preparedness come from the fact that we need to be more aware about what's going on and be prepared for some scenarios. So the best lesson I can draw from the different perspective is that we need to be prepared in the short and the medium term for more challenges, and it's our responsibility to take action on that kind of scenarios.
Bon, normalement, bien que nos présentations soient différentes, mais les leçons communes qu'on peut tirer, c'est que partout, alors la planète est une, et partout dans le monde, et les populations sont menacées, les espèces sont menacées. Donc, je pense qu'il faudrait partout une prise de conscience et des actions citoyennes responsables visant justement à améliorer les conditions des populations, mais aussi à poser des actions concrètes pour répondre à un ensemble de préoccupations, notamment sur le plan environnemental, sur le plan social, sur le plan économique, sur le plan de l'habitat, donc afin d'améliorer les conditions de vie des populations.
Merci beaucoup. Merci à vous trois. I'm aware of the timing, so I just want to maybe see if there's maybe 1 or 2 maximum questions from the audience before we enjoy the lunch. So if there's any question on the floor, please raise your hand. Yes, there is one. Okay, so this will be our only question, last question for this panel.
I have a question for the first speaker. If we want to reduce this greenhouse gas emissions, I think we could fly more slowly. Like if we fly at half the speed, we would have massively less CO2 emissions. Is that discussed, or is engineers thinking about that?
Well, thank you. That's an interesting question. Actually, there are many approaches to do that. One is based on the performance-based navigation. In that kind of solution is included in those strategies. However, estimated emission is something quite complicated because those emissions are not restricted to the use of the aircraft itself. It's just the part of the equation. Maybe we can reduce in that sense, but if we are not considering the other processes involved in the equation, like the ground operation, or maybe using more the sustainable engines, that approach could be overlooked. So the best of my answers, unfortunately, is that we need to consider every single aspect in the perspective in order to get more efficient solutions for the problem. It's more complex than we think.
Yep, thank you so much. So this was the second panel. I'd like to thank all of you again. You can go back to your seats. Okay, so today we've heard of 7 of our active LEADS trainees, and this is just a snapshot of all the topics covered by the LEADS trainees. It's an incredibly diverse group with so many interesting topics that are being researched in matter of sustainability at the digital age. To close this session, I'd like to invite you to a fun activity, which is called the priority table, which we have set up here carefully with the Ford Space team. And you can see on the table that we have about 8 squares, and each of those squares has a priority on them. And I'd like to come and have a look at those priorities and then vote with the sticky notes here on the ones that you consider the most pressing and the most important ones. Like, which ones would you stand up and fight for if you were to defend some of those priorities at societal level. So those priorities are all societal priorities at the intersection of sustainability and digital innovation. While you come, after you've come here and have a look at the table, we invite you for the lunch, and you can always come back to the table afterwards and then continue to vote. There's also a possibility for those joining online to vote as well. My colleague Andrea will be taking care of the online attendees. And yeah, so enjoy the lunch, enjoy the fun activity. Yes, there is a question. Yes. Good question. Yeah. Yeah, so try not to vote on all of them because I know they're all super interesting, but try to stick to maybe maximum 3-4 priorities so that we can have a clear idea of what stands out. It's really interesting for us to know what you, future generation of sustainability leaders, think of what is the most important and pressing. So try to stick to 3. There is also one blank one, this one, which has no priority. So if you want to add yours or something that you think about, please grab a sticky note and then leave us your comment or your own priority. So there's a buffet with vegetarian options available. Allergies should be indicated on there, on the tags, and just enjoy and come and talk to us and to ask questions if you have some. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Odile. Just to note, we're going to close up the live stream to YouTube right now, but of course, those of you on Zoom, stick around. We've, I think Andrea has put the notes in the chat, so just put your pick in there. And thanks again. Don't remember, and just to note also that this remains available on our YouTube channel. You should revisit it. And also have a great afternoon.